So welcome. Let's start together seated here once again. With your spine long and eyelids closed, bring conscious awareness to your breath. Again, letting go of the idea of there being something to do or accomplish. So that's true for the ego and the story and the narrative. Of course, there's, potentially something to do or accomplish. But when we come into the practice of yoga, this is the practice of behold now. And so here it is. And it looks just like this. Now it looks just like this. And so whatever you're feeling or experiencing in the senses and the mind and the body, behold. The present moment is described as 1,000-petaled lotus that's ever blossoming. It's always blooming from the center, ever changing. It appears to be. And so it appears to be ever-changing, and yet it is here, and it is now, and this does not change. And so it is timeless in this way. And somehow that thought should, it should be this way, obscures now. Somehow that thought later when something happens, that then I'll finally be fulfilled, be whole. And so the meditation, the breath awareness, the practice invites us into the uniqueness of this moment. We've seen there's a cycle of life, these seasons of life. We can see that life for the body, for the identity ends. Tomorrow is not promised. Our family, our friends may be gone soon. Feels like too soon. This way that things are now is fleeting. rare. Precious. Unique. They said there's nothing new under the sun, but somehow it's never been quite like this. Never exactly like this. "20 years, maybe we look back and reminisce on this time." But you're here now. It's great. Samavriti. Equal inhale, equal exhale. In this holy temple of the now. This is the only place that it ever happens, and this is the only time that it ever happens. Surrendering all fear, all preference, all shoulds, all identity. To once again relax, open all channels to this source of life now. Breathing in a way that relaxes the nervous system. Loving what is, just as it is. If you can love the challenge, 2, the struggle part, oh, then you're blessed. Loving all of it. Loving now, just as it is. So let's bring in one more pranayama piece. And this is an element of the pranayama that involves visualization, and then using the visualization, tuning into the feeling. And so cultivation of proprioception. And the basic breath is to inhale from the crown of the spine, the crown of the head to the base of the spine. And then exhale from the base of the spine to the crown of the head. And so as you inhale, visualizing a current that travels from the crown of the head to the base of the spine. And as you exhale, visualizing the current that travels from the base of the spine to the crown of the head. Now, of course, there actually is energy flow from the crown of the head to the base of the spine and the base of the spine to the crown of the head. So you can feel that potentially. We're becoming aware of this directional flow. Allow your awareness to travel along the length of the spine. And just like staying conscious during transitions, transition between inhale and exhale, the transition between waking and sleeping and dreaming. Notice if there's any way on this journey up or down the spine when you're yourself using effort. See if you can do the same practice effortlessly. Through relaxing. So once more, we bring palms together at heart center. Ishvara Pranidhana. Getting out of the way of your highest self. Getting out of your own way in any way that you limit yourself from really being yourself fully. Surrender to your highest. Surrender to the Most High. Surrender to the Supreme. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. May all beings everywhere be happy and free. Offering our efforts today to all beings everywhere, especially remembering anyone who's suffering. Seeing them feeling better really soon. Seeing them feeling all better. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Right, and then let's use this meditative awareness and turn to the mantras, which are located a page. Right at the end here. So 63, 62, 63. So the first week we did this invocation to practice. Om Sahana Bhavatu. So let's practice this one again, just to get to know it a little bit better.
I don't think I have marked my pages.
Oh, you don't? It's in the end of the first section. Yep. So yep, there's two sections of two sets of numbers.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah. So let's do it call and response again. And these are fun to practice. And again, if you weren't here, or just to remind, is that we're working on getting the sounds as close as we can to the sounds, but it's a practice. It's like sometimes people try to learn a foreign language and they want to pronounce everything so perfectly that they don't actually speak, and so they don't actually practice it. And so this giving ourselves permission to mispronounce in the best way. And then another way is I think about learning language is like babies. They don't do it in a really intellectual way. They don't figure out the verb order or any of that thing. They use what they call mirror neurons. Have you heard of this? That the babies have these mirror neurons, and so they're able to mirror what they see or what they hear. And so it's like almost like the kind of catching more of a spirit of a bird, like a mockingbird that's able to hear. Have you heard these birds that they hear a cell phone ring?
Oh.
Yeah, and they learn how to make that sound of a cell phone ring. So that's kind of what we're doing, is instead of thinking of these as words and things to learn, is so I'll call it out, and then you can call it back. Om Sahana Vavatu. Om Sahana Vavatu. Sahana Bhunaktu. Sahana Bhunaktu. Sahaviryam Karavavahai. Sahaviryam Karavavahai. Tejas Vinasvadi Tamastu. Tejas Vinasvadi Tamastu. Ma Vidvisha Vahai. Ma Vidvisha Vahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. That sounded really, really good. You want to try it together? Let's do it together. Om Sahana Bhavatu. Sahana Bhunaktu. Sahaviryam Karavavahai. Tejas Vinasvadi Tamastu. Ma Vivisha Vahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Good. And so this is an invocation to practice and an invocation to studying the Yoga Sutras and studying the classical practices of yoga that we can practice together in a good way that fits all beings, that we have really good energy and that we can keep it very respectful. So let's take a look at this next one. So this is in the tradition, the mantra tradition that I was taught, this is one of the first mantras that is shared with a practitioner. And so in the guru mantra realm, each individual may be given a different mantra. And that each of the mantras is like a medicinal plant or a homeopathic, where it has some aspect of that mantra is meant to balance our unique configuration. But this mantra is one that's said to be really good and really safe and really beneficial to everybody. And so the mantra is So Hum. And there's various ways to practice it. One is to inhale So, and it's almost the sound of the breath. So Hum. So that's a really good way. And I think that's a really nice way to practice it. Mantra is something that we can practice when we're in our seated practice. We might practice these breath exercises. We might do these pranayamas. We might, do other things to relax ourselves. And then at some point, you may almost ideally, we almost start to hear the mantra come in. And so that's something that can come in. And then the mantra, at the most surface level, becomes a way to move past thoughts. And so it becomes something that we can focus on that's not conceptual at all. A mantra has really no meaning. And some of these mantras have translations. And So Hum is I am that, which is certainly an interesting meditation. And so what does that mean, I am that?
It's getting rid of separation.
Right. So what's that?
Everything.
Everything. I am that. I am that. Yeah. And so we can meditate on that. Is it true? Of course, we know somehow from like the whole hologram, understanding of how the senses in this room is a hologram in the mind. Oh, this is my mind. I am that. Or we know from our interpretation too, like our experience, that we cast our prejudices, our prejudgments, we cast our preconceptions of things onto the world. And so basically what we're looking at is infinity, but then I have preconception, oh, that's a water bottle. And so I see a water bottle. Whereas someone who didn't have a preconception of a water bottle, what is that thing? Even someone from the 80s, to see one of these fancy modern water bottles, you'd be like, wow, what is that thing? But now we know we have this preconception. So we say, oh, it's just a water bottle. Just a tree. We're walking here, we pass a tree, just a tree. And we don't take a moment to really grasp how amazing and unknowable a tree is. Like just a person. It's so irritating that I have to deal with people throughout my interactions throughout the day. So I had to deal with this. People get so upset. We get so upset that we had someone, cut us off. But if we're looking at a person, it's interesting to think. It's like, wow, you're looking at how many cells make up a person. Let's say 1 billion. I don't know what the number is, but say it's 1 billion cells, and they're all breathing together. As you breathe, as you bring the breath in, it's like 1 billion cells all breathing together. How old are these cells? Each cell maybe has an individual age, but the codes that make up those cells, how old are those cells? They're billions of years old. So you have this billions of year old organism, basically like a dinosaur, something like that. But these codes that have been transforming for billions and billions of years, sitting here in front of you, and all these cells breathing together. It's like being in the presence of like a Buddha or a Christ or something. If just observing someone's body, and then we just immediately stereotype there, just slap a label on it, and it's just like, okay. So this so hum is a way of cutting through this story that we're going to be talking about today with the yoga, with the hatha yoga. And then the other piece is when we're dealing with mantra. So this is a creation story, and it's a interesting one because it's different than maybe the creation stories that we've heard, but it's in many creation stories. It's in the Kabbalah, in the Hebraic stories of the language, that the language is actually the building blocks that create the illusion of the world. So we have it in English, we say that it's spelling, right? And so we use consonants and vowels to spell, and then that spell creates the illusion or the dream of the world. And so that's how that became a water bottle, was because someone cast a spell, and that spell became a word, right? And right, they say that too, in the beginning was the Word, right? And the Word was God. But then as it differentiated and it became out and it took all the different forms of everything and everyone. And so the mantra is a way of utilizing the foundational components of the spell, and it's actually, they say that the mantras are patterns or codes that are heard in that state of heightened awareness. And then these patterns or codes are taken from these states of this connected awareness, and then come back here. And then when we repeat them, they take us back. They bring us back home. So that's a little bit about what they say about the mantra. But the mantras are these type of mantras are what's called bija mantras, and bija means seed. So the bija mantras are seed mantras, and another way that they're called is matrikas, or little mothers, right? And then that's interestingly similar to how they talk about like quantum mothers or atomic mothers, right? The building blocks of the universe. So that's the definition of matrika, is the building blocks of the universe. But how it works, I mean, I'm sure that if we could see vibrations and we could say, wow, look, it turns out that the floor is built out of sound. Right? If we could see vibration like quantum, we'd say, wow, look, the floor is built out of sound. And maybe it's built out, maybe this, what we call wood, is a specific mantra, right? If you could comprehend sound at that atomic level. But it interestingly works just like, for instance, we have a chair, right? So what are the atomic building blocks or of a chair? C-H-A-I-R, right? So we have the vowels and the consonants that make up the chair. And it's a funny thing, because is there a concept of a chair without the word chair? Potentially, but somehow like a lot of the meaning and everything that we've tied up in thinking of that as a chair, because is that really a chair?
What was the question you asked? Like, is it self-evidence? Like,
Is that self-evidently a chair? Yeah.
Right now it's a plant stand.
Yeah. Right now it's a plant stand, and it's like someone who'd never seen a chair or didn't have a concept of sitting in chairs, didn't have that cultural context of, oh, that's something to sit in, might see that and say, what an intriguing object. I wonder what they would use that for, you know? So these are interesting things. But then even if you start to repeat that mantra, let's say that chair, 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 and you repeat it and you keep repeating it, chair, chair, chair. And I say, hey, that's a chair. It's a chair. You hear how it starts to even lose meaning. We start to say, what, a chair? That sounds strange to say a chair. And when we even start to listen to actually the sound of the word chair, it starts to break down. And so the mantra has a way, and if you repeat it fast, chair, 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 and it becomes a frequency, and you repeat it again and again and again and again, and you can imagine that you could speed it up. We put it into, Ableton. You can do this in your mind, right? We put it into your software program. We go chair, 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 and then we turn up the frequency. We go, and then next thing you know, you're like, you see what I'm saying? So this is how the mantra works with repetition, and all of a sudden you realize the whole illusion chair just it breaks down into the quantum building blocks. So this is what's being described with these mantras, is that that's a good one, chair, good mantra. Anything can be a mantra, but these mantras right here, these are the spells. These are like what you have here is the very highly revered spells that have been passed on for thousands of years from people who love people, and they say, hey, I want to share, this is a good one. So let's try we'll just sing, we're going to make up a Soham song. And we can start call or response, and then if you kind of pick up on the words, then you can jump right in. So
So who the fuck else has a voice of an angel between you two now? I'm like,
Harmonizing.
well, I know. Any other secrets?
All right. So we'll keep working on these, but feel free to play with these in your meditation practice now. I think going with these mantras playfully, and you can sing them, and I'm sure you can look them up on Spotify too. And I'm sure there's versions of all of these mantras on Spotify that you can connect with, and so there's a lot of different ways to work with the mantra. And I'll tell you that so the tradition has been the main source for me has been the meditation center in Northeast Minneapolis here, which happened was, and we'll go into the history of this, but a guy known as Swami Rama came here in the 70s, and then Swami Veda too, and they shared the practices that they had learned growing up in India, and through their really interesting, really amazing stories with a whole community here. And now that community is in their 60s and 70s and is still walking around the Twin Cities, or and still practicing up at the meditation center. And one of the stories that my teacher Stoma had mentioned was that in the 70s there was like this time when it was people were kind of tuning in, and it was like, wow, we have a yoga teacher here in the Twin Cities, and the hippies or whoever it was were kind of like, let's go get mantras. And so a lot of people received mantras at that time, and then they would get calls periodically over the next 30 years of someone saying, hey, so I received a mantra back in 1970, and then I never really practiced it or did anything with it, but now I can't get it out of my head, And so there's a piece about these working with, we find a mantra, and the mantras are again, they're considered like medicine, where they almost have an informational template or an informational pattern, which when we work with it, it's not about just like consuming it, but when we work with it, it interfaces with our own codes in a benevolent way. And same kind of idea with a plant, is where a plant has information encoded into it, and a mantra has harmonics and all of that stuff encoded into it. So that's that is.
How different, somehow, in my mind anyways, I'm like crossing over prayer with mantra. Is there like a very important distinction?
That's such a deep question, because what is prayer, And so at the heart of it, no, there would be no separation at all. But sometimes, the way that we use the word prayer could be like, hey, I wanna, dear God, it's been a while. But someone posted that they're like, my wife treats me like a god. Hey, she only ever talks to me when she needs something. And other than that, she treats me like I'm not here. Right? So there's that level of prayer where we're asking for something. And then there's another way of praying where, where you're just being in the presence of in presence, and that's really similar to so the same thing with the mantra. Like we could just repeat the mantra and just repeat it, and it just But these practices lead into a deeper experience, and so I think that's a really good point, Kathleen. That we're in the same thing. Yeah.
Did anyone else grow up Catholic?
I'm Christian, but like as you get older, you realize all that stuff again. But when I'm doing this, I realize I'm always coming back to. Like that's what happens. I know it's like so but I realize I'm back to just communing with God and my type of prayer where I was raised, it's not like I'm like, hey God, it's me again. It's more like this is me communing with God and like opening up to my flaws and seeing where I need to grow and stuff like that. And that's where I come when we're doing this stuff. So like how you say it should be like a segue to get there. I feel like, okay, like I'm kind of there already in that center of communing and trying to, wherever that is, you know, but I'm always there. I'm like, I don't want to say like it's not defeating the purpose, but maybe I do need to take steps to get there, you know?
Not necessarily.
Right.
Yeah, there's no, you know, all these thoughts should. It's really, and it's like what, it's like this kind of thought, like, should we be doing something right now? You know, it's like this. And we could think about it logically, and we'd be like, yeah, we should be doing something. We should start a campaign. We should make some money. We should, you know, and we think about all of these things that. But logically speaking, looking at it intellectually, realistically, tomorrow's not promised. You know, this moment is really, really sacred, really holy. I want to come back to what you were going to say about the Catholicism.
Are you talking about like Gregorian chant and like singing Latin and all that kind of
Well,
stuff?
I'm just, so is it anyone like go to confirmation, communion, mass every Sunday, anything like that?
I just became
That was
Catholic
raised-
this year.
Are you fucking with me?
No, my wife's family is Catholic.
Uh-huh.
And so I've been being able to go to some of the ceremonies. They're Mexican Catholic, and so the first time I got to visit her family was for a rosario, which is a 9-day funeral, and so you pray with the rosaries, and they'd pass around the rosaries, and then they'd pass around this book of mantras, which is these prayers that are very methodical, right? With 200 names of the goddess. And
well, I was just like going through this. So my mom, I was raised Catholic, not like my mom is very, like, she would consider herself spiritual and almost more culturally Catholic, but oh wow. Never mind. No. But
it's
as we were,
this is for France.
okay, hi France. So what I was realizing is I was explaining to her yoga teacher training, and it's like beyond her comprehension just because she doesn't understand yoga, but she's like a deeply spiritual person. So I was describing it, but then just sitting here, I immediately just started thinking of confirmation class and first communion as a child, and even learning saints have different prayers that go towards saints when you're calling in something. And then growing up, we had rosaries, and even like you say, a chant or a mantra or a prayer to a specific, like there's Saint Anthony when you lose things. There's all these different saints that have these kind of calls to them that tap into the thing you're looking for.
Right.
So I was just sitting here realizing like, oh, I should just tell her it's like first communion, but not like just the
and
ritual
that's they call that Santeria too.
Yeah.
Right? So Santeria is the way, and so this is how I imagine that what happened is you have this the Catholicism was being used as a social control too, and so you have this colonial wave where these guys wearing armor and swords and just crazy guys come over and they'll be like, this is Jesus Christ, he's our Lord and Savior, this is Jesus Christ, he's God. And the the grandfather or the grandmother was like, oh, okay, you say this man is a god, who's his mother? And because who created him? And now if you go to Mexico or you go to Latin America, you see all of these altars to Guadalupe. You see all of these altars to the Holy Mother. And that's just how it's always been. So they say that Guadalupe, they also call her Tonantzin, which was the name before the Christians came. And so all of these saints, they were like, oh, well, what is this? Oh, this saint's associated with the sea, right? She's our Holy Mother of the water, Yemanja, right? And so they already had names for all of these forces, but they're like, okay, you want to call it, Santa Barbara, we can work it like that too. So
that's one thing I was going to bring up too, is there's a lot of, my undergrad was in a lot of the colonizing experience to Latin America, and one of the things that kind of shocked me was understanding that a lot of the indigenous groups that ended up being turned into Catholics, it wasn't that far of a stretch for them, some of the practices and rituals of Franciscans, and so they would show up to Mass and do their own thing and even put symbols when they were building the Catholic churches of their own, but the ritual and the experience of it wasn't that far from some of their own practices.
It's based on at the heart of Christianity, you have the concept of a Christ, right? And what's a Christ? That's a pre-Christian term, is Christ. And a Christ is like a Buddha, right? A Christ is someone who knows how to go out, but comes back for everyone. You know, so as they say, that it's a selfless, that's what it is it's a selfless thing. It's the same thing as yoga. It's not that, you know, the idea of like this is the Son of God, this is the one and only Son of God, and this is the one way. That's a red flag for a cult. A red flag anytime it's the one way. But Jesus was kind of like, you know, we're, you know, if you kind of take the words literally, he was like, you know, the kingdom of heaven is within you. You know, the kingdom of heaven is all around you, but you don't see it. Right? And you know, did Jesus say, you know, I'm not a biblical scholar, so I'm not going to start pulling verses out and be able to accurately do this, but did Jesus say, I am the only Son of God, or did he say that we're all the children of this? You know,
My dad
so.
always quotes, he did theology studies at a Catholic university in the 70s, and he always quotes that Jesus said, greater miracles than I you shall do, or something like that.
Yeah.
Just in like that, you know, I don't know, that's one of his go-tos. If you think about like what we've manifested in reality here with, you know, 3D printing like organs and stuff, like, I mean, that's kind of far out.
Greater miracles than that too, we're going to be taking a look at right in this practice. And this Jesus, I got a few Jesus quotes. I got a few Jesus talking about Hatha Yoga. Right, so that's what we're going to be looking at a little bit later today, is going into the geometry and the philosophy of Hatha Yoga and understanding how this can be used as a ladder. And then when you understand the Hatha Yoga and the universality of that, and then listen to what Jesus is saying, now all of a sudden it's like, oh, actually that whole thing about the eye of the needle makes really perfect sense.
I feel like Jesus was the first to like reach, maybe not the first, but he just reached samadhi, you know, enlightenment, and he's like, when he came back, he like chose the bodhisattva path to come and like could have stayed in the kingdom, but chose to come and be amongst the people and to show them the way. I feel like that's kind of what we're all here doing, you know, learning and cultivating these practices so that we can go out and share the good word and resonate on a vibration that is of God consciousness. Like that's, we are all God's.
And when Jesus is sharing that, when he realizes that realization that they're in the yoga they call it enlightenment or samadhi, is and it's past all of the stories, but it's to see the truth of that everything that we're calling that or other is all one self. And it's not myself. It's not like, oh wow, everything is me. You know, that's a misunderstanding. But what I call me is a tiny part of the one thing that takes the form of everything. And so this is where we're going to be looking at all of that stuff, whether you call it water. Right? We could look at it and we could have a water religion and we could say, wow, every single person in here is the living water. Right? Your bodies are made out of water. Your everything, your mind, everything is water. It's the expression of water. What do? We see. What does water do? It reflects light. Right? And so we see all these reflections of ourselves. We see all these reflections of the water in everything and everybody. And that would be literally more true than all these other stories that we tell about name and class and political affiliation and religious affiliation and gender and race and all of those things. We could say, oh, that's me, this is my gender. But even truer than that is that I'm water, right? Even truer, because that's self-evident, is this whole water piece. And the other thing is like a lot of story can get tied up in all of that. Or another way that you could say is, we could say that we're all part of this matter, right? We wanted to take a scientific approach and look and say, look, everyone is made out of matter, right? Even our thoughts are made out of subtle matter. So this is what the ancients knew, but they didn't call it matter. What did they call it? Mother. Or Mat, right? You go back to the ancient Egyptian, they called it Mat. Or they called it Maria, the mother, Ma, aka Ma. And so we have Ma, Maria. This is where it gets so interesting with the language. Is this intentional? Was it coded in? Is it the remnants of some older mantric language? Ma, Trika, Shri Ma, Man, Mantra, Mother. These are always back. We have, in Spanish, we have El Mar, right? And Maria is the expression of what? The Mar. What's the Mar? The sea. Maria is somehow the sea. In English, we have Isis, right? It's primordial goddess. I see. And that's even the structure of our language, like how we say, I see something. But who are we, right? They say, that we all came from the sea, that these creatures of the sea somehow came out onto the land, and then, we live out here, but the heart of it is we are the sea. In some sense encoded in the language, I see. Even we say I see, why is it like that? I don't know. Is it, is there some type of intelligent design, or is that just how that words kind of fall and gravitate towards certain meanings? There's another one that's interesting, I think, is that in English, the word mermaid is like maid. Isn't that interesting? So it's the word mermaid in English is mar, woman, a woman from the mar, but the word mermaid in Spanish is what? Sirena. What's the sea? Oh, the sea, and reina means queen. So the sirena, the word in Spanish is queen of the sea in English. And so why is it like that? I don't know. But this is where you get into that. That's, to me, that's mantra.
That sounds better than
Accurate.
being a mermaid.
Right, a mermaid, but you see how they switch, like in English they use the Spanish word for sea, in Spanish they use the English word for sea. Isn't that weird? Like how sea, reina, sea,
And also
right?
coming
Mermaid.
from queen to maid.
Yeah.
And I feel like our culture is so much about taking the royalty and taking the power out of the language. Yeah, that feels so intentional.
But even then we break down maid, ma'id, right? So we have ma, right? So it is like, a lot of these words that we have connotations with, that's where the empowering thing is, to break these things down. And this is like being a lawyer, right? So a lawyer is someone who goes and understands the meanings of words, not how they're being used colloquially. And then if you really want to get into this, and I hope you guys do, I think it may be too late for me, but international law. Understand international law. Because a lot of the things that are being thrown around in this culture as being the law are illegal under international law. And that corporate statutes and things that are being described by the government can be used. And so you can have a system, like a colonial system, which is illegal under international law. That right now what's being committed is war crimes. But when we're stuck up in the media and being informed by a corporate paradigm and being educated in our schools or indoctrinated by a corporate strategy, they're not going to allow us to have any conception of what the true law is. So it's starting to ask those questions. What is Allah? So
Suggestion.
mantra, lawyer, yeah.
Oh my god, and if we're talking
Allah.
about words, you said Allah too. Like,
Allah. Oh, see, this is how you, and this is how we'll get Jeffrey Williams in here too, and we can play these word games all day. And pretty soon we'll be like, we're saying things, we don't know what we're saying, but it's like, but you said Allah. What is Allah? Right? Allah. Right? And you said a suggestion, and I would suggest that Allah is not a suggestion. If it's Allah, like for instance, they say the law of gravity, right? I throw this up, right? What's going to happen? Does it matter how I feel about it? So that's a law.
Which is like the what is it, the sat,
Sat,
right?
right?
Unchanging, self-evident.
Unchanging, self-evident. And that's not even sat, right? Because are there times when gravity's not there? When? Space?
When you're
We
going fast
imagine.
enough.
I haven't been to space, but unless
Zero
this
gravity
is space, right? So is there gravity? Is there air in space? That's one of the conspiracies. He said there's a song, Cannibal Ox song. Is that what they're called? Cannibal Ox? It's a rap group. I just remember the intro. He goes, "They lied when they said there's no air in space." Yeah. So anyway, I don't know. Maybe they did. It's the biggest conspiracy. So
You never lived to tell if you did know. So.
you would never live to tell, or who knows? How do you know? But we were talking about Allah and laws, and so something that's sat. This is the thing about sat. If something is sat, it's always true. There's never a time when it's not true. So if I say that this is here, we would think, well, yeah, it's self-evident, it's here, but is this always going to be here? So this is not sat. That's the difference between sat and what we call maya. Right? This is here temporarily. It's conditional. The condition is that it's here in time, but when it's gone, whoop, it's gone. Where did it go? You guys aren't gonna fall for that one, but that's how these things are. Here one day, gone the next. But sat is always here. So if you answer that question, what is always here? What's the one thing that is always here?
Present moment.
Yeah. Pretty much, yep. That's it. Energy is another one,
I
yep.
feel like energy is the ultimate truth. It just takes all kinds of different shapes.
Energy is what is energy? This is where we're getting into the Hatha yoga. Now, what is energy? Movement, good one. Right? Because we said that the wave, remember we were talking about the waves versus the particles, and the energy is movement. And we defined prana as constantly moving. That's what they say, that those syllables pra and na mean constantly moving. So energy is constantly moving. But is it changing?
Yeah.
Constantly changing. And that's like, isn't that an interesting concept? Constantly changing. So it's a constant. So they say there, you've heard that the one constant is change. So that would be sat, because it's constant. Is change constant? What was the Octavia Butler quote about change?
She has a lot. There's God is change.
God is change,
Yeah.
right? And so in the yoga, that would be an accurate thing, except they would say goddess is change, maybe, because
God is change.
God is change.
You could go all day, man.
Yeah, please, let's work on it. This is how you break through the coding, right? So it's all self-evident. It's right before our eyes, but the codes and the patterns that have been put there to block the flow of energy. So we can do it like this, poetically or linguistically break through the coding. We said God is change. She said God is change. So we don't have to say God. We don't even have to, genderize that. But the reason I did is because in the tradition, as we're going to come to in the Raja Yoga, there's two. You know how they say there's two types of people in the world, right? People who like chunky peanut butter and people who don't, or people who like pulp in their orange juice and people who don't, or whatever it is. They say there's two types of people. Is that true?
No.
But they say in yoga that there's two things in the entire everything, realm of all existence. One is change, or matter, or mother, and the other, it's everything that's created, and the other is awareness. Or another way that you say the same thing is, one is to the power of perception, to see, and the other is what is seen. So this is a good mental exercise to consider, these types of possibilities. So we're going to be looking at this, the seer and the seen. The seer and the seen. And the seen is what? Changing. Always. Everything that we see is always changing. The form. But it's described like a 1,000-petaled lotus. And if you would see this 1,000-petaled lotus, that it's like has anyone seen this sacred geometry, the shape of a torus? So a torus is like
Spiral thing.
Yeah.
And it's like everywhere in Earth, or like in nature, it like repeats.
Right. So if we had a torus, like if there was a torus field, which there is, we actually they like you were saying, in nature you can use these like Kirlian photography or whatever to see these things. But imagine that you had an energy that was going from the base of the spine up the spine and then out the crown of the head and then looping around and then coming back in through the base of the spine. And it's going around in 360 degrees. And so what shape does that kind of create?
Sphere?
A big donut, yeah, kind of like, but because it's got the thing coming out, so there's a hole in the center where the energy passes and then it goes around. And so basically you've created, like, you imagine this big donut around your spine if you sit up really straight, and you can feel this big donut going around. So they call this a torus, right? And then the 1,000-petaled lotus, imagine you were looking down at this torus and you were seeing that all these petals constantly coming from the center of the flower, like it was blossoming from the center. And as it blossomed, then the petals would ripple out and they'd go to the edge and eventually they'd fall off. But it was, if you kept your eye at the center, it'd be like one of those YouTube videos where they're like, meditate 432 hertz, binaural waves, and you watch and it's like, right, that's like that. So that's the 1,000-petaled lotus coming. And what it takes the form of is everything changing. So everything that we're seeing here is changing. It's arising, it's constantly changing, arising from the center of now. But that change is constant. It is self-evident. Was it ever not changing? That's the question. And if you find a place where there's no change, that'll be really interesting. And we'll talk about that then. So, how are we doing for time here? 108. Let's do this.